This is The Conspiracy of Man, a video series about Yeshu the man. Not Yeshu the Christ or anointed God of Christian myth, but Yeshu the man, who he actually was and what he actually did. The Conspiracy of Man is a story about the Essenae conspiracy to bring down the temple using Yeshu to fulfill the laws of the blood sacrifice, ancient laws ostensibly established by Moses with Yahweh. By offering himself up as the final blood sacrifice of the Paschal lamb, Yeshu brought into question the entire sacrificial system. This is video 11 in the Conspiracy of Man series. It is a story of women, Samaritans, and Yeshu's first miracle. Before proceeding to the first miracle, the temple priesthood's attitudes towards women and the Samaritans needs to be addressed. St. John wrote the well-known story of the woman at the well. Sergio Leone might have written this scene as the woman with no name meets Yeshu at a watering hole just outside Jerusalem. First, one needs to understand why the good temple priests hated the bad Samaritans and how Yeshu faced an ugly truth by talking to a Samaritan woman. We know how the patriarchal temple members viewed women as chattel, possessions owned by a male. Prevailing temple members held women in contempt as they did Samaritans. But why? Why did the temple priests hate the Samaritans? Certainly not because one stopped to help an injured man after the priests moved to the other side of the road to ignore the man's plight. The detail explaining the hatred for Samaritans is made evident in the story when the woman says, quote, "Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and ye say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship." End quote. This establishes the fact that there are two different religious practices that are in conflict. Samaritans worshipped on Mount Gerizim as opposed to the Temple Mount. Somehow, the woman at the well recognizes Yeshu's priestly status when she says, "Ye say." Who are the ye who say, but the priests who say one must worship in Jerusalem? The story takes place at Jacob's well, and considering the vast amount of time between Jacob of the Old Testament and first-century Jerusalem, this well probably had the same historical significance as those beds George Washington slept in. Quote, "Yeshu therefore, being wearied with his journey, sat thus on the well, and it was about the 6th hour. There cometh a woman of Samaria to draw water. Yeshu saith unto her, Give me to drink. Then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, How is it that thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans." End quote. Herein one clearly sees the Temple Jews' prevailing attitude towards women and Samaritans in general. So why the problem with Samaritans? Samaritans were in fact a significant segment of Judea-Jewish population, witness they have claim to Jacob's well. The problem lay in the fact that Samaritans practiced their own form of sacrificial worship they still practice today. This religious sect practiced a sacrificial ritual that did not pay tribute to the temple, thus engendering its opposition. Yeshu tells the woman that he has come to address the same issue with the temple, and then hints there is something significant in his words about sacrificial worship. Quote, "Yeshu answered and said unto her, If thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, Give me to drink, thou wouldest have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water. The woman saith unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence then hast thou that living water? Art thou greater than our father Jacob, which gave us the well, and drank thereof himself, and his children, and his cattle? Yeshu answered and said unto her, Whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again. But whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. The woman saith unto him, Sir, give me this water, that I thirst not, neither come hither to draw." End quote. Anticipating a new form of indoor plumbing, the woman asked for this eternal water spigot so she no longer has to make tiresome trips to the well. Then Yeshu does a strange thing, asking the woman to call her husband. Quote, "Jesus saith unto her, Go, call thy husband, and come hither." The woman answered and said, I have no husband. Yeshu said unto her, Thou hast well said, I have no husband. For thou hast had 5 husbands, and he whom thou now hast is not thy husband. In that saidst thou truly. End quote. Here Yeshu confronts the woman's own nature by pointing out her adultery, an act that would have resulted in stoning under temple law. It is interesting that Yeshu degrades the woman in this manner, as an Essene master would have been unlikely to be so callous in his approach. However, patriarchal gospel storytellers would indeed have been likely to embellish the tale in this manner. Quote, The woman saith unto him, Sir, I perceive that thou art a prophet. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and ye say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. Yeshu saith unto her, Woman, believe me, the hour cometh, when ye shall neither in this mountain, nor yet at Jerusalem, worship the Father. Ye worship ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. End quote. This quote provides the key detail to the story. Yeshu tells the woman that God is not in these religious places and practices of worship, and by ending the sacrificial worship of blood, he is the salvation of the Jews from their ceremonial bloodlust. Herein one sees the Temple Jews' prevailing attitude towards women and Samaritans in general. So why the problem with Samaritans? Samaritans were in fact a significant segment of Judea-Jewish population, witness they have claim to Jacob's well. The problem lay in the fact that they practiced their own form sacrificial worship that they still practice today. This religious sect practiced a sacrificial ritual that did not pay tribute to the temple, thus engendering its opposition. Yeshu tells the woman that he has come to address the same issue with the temple, and then hints there is something significant in his words about sacrificial worship. Quote, Yeshu answered and said unto her, If thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, Give me to drink, thou wouldest have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water. The woman saith unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence then hast thou that living water? Art thou greater than our father Jacob, which gave us the well, and drank thereof himself, and his children, and his cattle? Yeshu answered and said unto her, Whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again. But whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst, but the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. The woman saith unto him, Sir, give me this water, that I thirst not, neither come hither to draw. Yeshu saith unto her, Go, call thy husband, and come hither. The woman answered and said, I have no husband. Yeshu said unto her, Thou hast well said, I have no husband. For thou hast had 5 husbands, and he whom thou now hast is not thy husband. In that saidst thou truly. End quote. Here, Yeshu confronts the woman's own nature by pointing out her adultery, an act that would have resulted in stoning under temple law. Quote, The woman saith unto him, Sir, I perceive that thou art a prophet. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and ye say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. Yeshu saith unto her, Woman, believe me, the hour cometh, when ye shall neither in this mountain, nor yet at Jerusalem, worship the Father. Ye worship ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. End quote. Here is the key detail to the story. Yeshu tells the woman that God is not in these religious places and practices of worship, and by ending the sacrificial worship of blood, he is the salvation from the Jews' ceremonial bloodlust. Yeshu's first miracle. As was covered in the earlier video about the law, first-century temple followers considered miracles to be an unintended outcome to the law. This meant the law had been acted upon, either intentionally or unintentionally, in a manner that ran counter to the spirit of the law's original intent. Priests charged for their services as it was the law to collect tribute for such services. Thus, a priest performing a service in an official capacity would always demand tribute for services rendered. This was but one method used to keep the temple's treasury full. One of the most common tributes was for the blessing. This was an official function only a priest could perform in a legally recognized, accepted manner. It was a service for which Yeshu and his cousin John refused tribute, thus running counter to the law. With Yeshu still reeling from his initial encounter with the synagogue members, Miriam asked her son to accompany her to a wedding that unfolds in a small village nestled in Galilee, an area known for its agricultural environment. This was the village of Cana. During the time of Yeshu, weddings were significant social events that often lasted several days, bringing together families and communities. The story takes place within the context of Jewish customs. Wine played a crucial role in temple life festivities. Running out of wine would have brought embarrassment to the host, an unfortunate occurrence during such a sacred festive occasion. However, the issue at the wedding in Cana was not a matter of running out of wine, but running out of blessed wine. Aware of the situation, Miriam approaches her son, expressing concern over the impending shortage of wine, but doesn't explicitly ask Yeshu to intervene. Quote, "When the wine ran short, the mother of Yeshu said to him, 'They have no wine.' Yeshu said to her, 'Woman, how does your concern affect me? My hour has not yet come.'" End quote. It is interesting that Yeshu addresses his mother in a demeaning manner as woman before asking what the problem has to do with him. Wouldn't mom or mother have been more appropriate? But woman? Is this Yeshu cutting his mother's apron strings? Well, at least he probably wasn't living in her basement. In this quote, one again finds the patriarchal attitude of the Jewish storytellers. Then Miriam tells Yeshu there is unblessed wine in the storehouse, but it needs a priest's blessing. Not wanting to expose his status again at this point and risk making a scene at a wedding feast, Yeshu tells Miriam his hour has not yet come. However, arrangements are made. Miriam then goes to the servants, saying, quote, "Do whatever he tells you." End quote. It is written there were 6 stone water jars present for Jewish ceremonial washings, each holding 20 to 30 gallons. These vessels were ritually pure or clean. Yeshu then tells the servants in front of the crowd to fill the jars with water. Most assume this plays out in full view of the crowd, but it is more likely the servants took the jars to another location to empty, rinse, and refill the jars. Then, upon their return, Yeshu would challenge the tasting of the wine. As these vessels would have already had water in them, Yeshu is telling the servants in an oblique manner to empty them and refill them with the unblessed, unclean wine, thus ritually purifying the wine without further blessing. Being good servants, they fill the vessels to the brim. Now, think about this. Water weighs 8 pounds per gallon. That's between 160 and 240 pounds per vessel without the weight of the jars. So we're talking around 200 to 300 pounds per vessel. Must have been some hefty servants to lug those jars around filled to the brim. Me thinks there might be slight exaggeration as to the size of these vessels. 5 gallons more or less would be in line for vessels serving as hand-washing basins. But then John is known for his descriptive hyperbole. When the servants returned with the refilled jars, Yeshu told them, "Draw some out now and take it to the headwaiter." So they took the sample to the headwaiter, also serving as wine steward. Now for the clue, that little detail that tells the story. A telling detail included for no apparent reason. Quote, "And when the headwaiter tasted the water that had become wine, without knowing where it came from, although the servers who had drawn the water knew." End quote. There it is. There is the telling detail. The servants knew, but what did they know? They knew the trick of ritually purifying the wine because they had been accomplices to it. Then the headwaiter called the bridegroom and said to him, quote, "Everyone serves good wine first, and then, when people have drunk freely, an inferior one. But you have kept the good wine until now." End quote. Here the headwaiter cheekily accuses the bridegroom wedding host of being a classic Jewish cheapskate who kept the good wine for last. Now for one last bit of good old St. John hyperbole. Quote, Yeshu did this as the beginning of his signs in Cana in Galilee, and so revealed his glory, and his disciples began to believe in him. End quote. Well, at least they believed they would not have to make so many trips to the wine cellar. What the disciples actually understood was Yeshu's intellect and power to manipulate the law. Is it any wonder Jewish sources say this was but one of Yeshu's tricks? Somewhere between the Jews' vicious, hateful portrayal of Yeshu as a devilish trickster and con man, and the Christians' glorified man, God of absolute spiritual purity, lies the truth. In that truth, one finds a man of incredible courage and conviction in his mission. A man who loved his people to the point he was willing to commit himself to being a sacrificial, blood offering to the temple god Yahweh in order to free his people from the temple's oppressive legal power. There are 37, quote, miracles described in the Gospels. These cover a wide range of actions, but mostly involve healing. As was covered in the earlier video about the law, to the 1st century, temple followers considered a miracle to be an unintended outcome to the law. This meant the law had been acted upon, either intentionally or unintentionally, in a manner that ran counter to the spirit of the law's original intent. Unusual power to heal afflictions has been recorded among cultures throughout the world. These acts are typically performed by some kind of spiritual master of the type Yeshu presented to his followers. Yet healing performed by these other masters never held the profound religious implications given to it by Christians. The fact is, healing was not considered miraculous by Temple Jews, unless it impacted the law, such as the healing being performed during Shabbat, where it would be considered work under temple law. Other miracles involved the casting out of demons or devils from possessed individuals. Demon possession is still a widely believed phenomenon today, and one that is focused on by Hollywood movies like The Exorcist. However, the belief of demons stemmed from ancient times of superstition, when the unknown presented something beyond man's grasp or control. The idea of such supernatural forces is used by religion to terrify believers that they are dealing with an intense evil force beyond almost all control. An evil demonic power that cannot be resisted by physical restraint. Only the pure religious or spiritual leader can cast out demons. This belief in evil provides narrators of such stories a certain degree of subconscious control over the listener that can be manipulated. The trick works better by firelight. What is evil but a subjective human construct? Ask yourself where evil can be found outside of the human condition. Can the lion that pounces on an innocent lamb to devour it be considered evil? Can a supernova that swallows entire galaxies whole be considered evil? Like beauty, evil is in the eye of the beholder. This fact can be seen by the current rash of movies that portray crazed psychopathic killers as good guys because they are killing evil people. With that in mind, we now examine how Christian revisionist turned gospel legend into stories of demon possession to advance their religious agenda. One such story of temple oppression being transformed into a story of demon possession is about an insane man living in Gadara, a Gentile settlement on the shores of Lake Gennesaret. And here one finds the first clue to the story. The man lives among unclean Gentiles. The story of the insane man of Gadara. Would Yeshu really destroy someone's livelihood just to get rid of demons? Surely there is a better way. When one realizes what these stories are about from the 1st century Jewish perspective, they are not nonsensical as atheists maintain, nor are they historical as true believers claim. Gospel traditions are records of how 1st century Jews thought and acted in regards to temple law. These stories are framed around the backdrop of the Second Temple's sacrificial laws. If this is not understood, then the stories appear disjointed and meaningless, with no purpose other than an attempt to create a glorified God in the form of a man. Remember, these stories are only about Jews. All other descriptions, like those about preaching the word to Gentiles, are nothing more than later Christian revision to fool the gullible by obfuscating that fact. So what is the actual story of the demon-possessed man of Gadara? This takes a bit of extrapolation or reading between the lines. Again, this story must be framed within the Bible, a book written by Jews, for Jews, about Jews. Gentiles are portrayed in the Bible as two-dimensional characters that serve only as supporting props for stories about the Jewish characters. To begin, one must understand who is being addressed in this story. The crazed man is in fact an ostracized temple follower. We are not told of the infraction that resulted in his imprisonment and self-ostracizing, as it was no doubt felt to be irrelevant by revisionist storytellers. So, how can one know this to be the case? By his actions. He lives in tombs with pigs for roommates. He might have been eating ham sandwiches and bacon bits as well. Along with Gentiles, tombs and pigs represented the two worst forms of filth and uncleanliness imaginable to Jews of that era. According to temple law, it was profoundly illegal to come into contact with such religiously and culturally abhorrent things. What this crazed man was demonstrating by these actions is his total rejection of the temple and its sacrificial laws. In effect, he is making a public statement that brings Yeshu to him. As Yeshu approaches, the man cries out in rage, "Be gone from me, priest! I recognize you! You drove me from the temple. My neighbors ostracized me. You priests imprisoned me. You broke me. You took my life, my family, my God, my money, and now I have nothing. So I adopt this place to live in and among the worst forms of filth which you and your temple have accused me of being a part. Go. Leave me in peace, priest, to dwell among this filth." In the 1st century, Gadara was a Gentile, swine-herding community. So we find this particular Jew has also chosen to live among Gentiles that are on par with pigs for uncleanliness. Thus, the insane man cannot show any more utter rejection of the temple and its laws. So here we find a mentally unstable Jew of violent temperament going completely off the deep end, breaking his shackles to escape the temple's prison and flee into the wilderness. And what better place to hide than in the midst of hated Gentiles? Note, the man is unclothed. This is yet another clue as to this man's Jewish identity, as he rejects woven cloth taxed by the temple. Therefore, what might this crazed man think when he sees a rather notorious temple priest walking towards him? Of course, he goes over the edge and begins attacking Yeshu as the symbol of his oppression. Quote, "When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell down before him, and with a loud voice said, 'What have I to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of God Most High?'" End quote. Note the similarity to the man in the synagogue with a spirit of an unclean devil in him that cried out with a loud voice, saying, quote, "Let us alone. What have we to do with thee, thou Yeshu of Nazareth? Art thou come to destroy us? I know thee who thou art, the Holy One of God." End quote. Christian revisions to the story are obvious in the attempt to make Yeshu into a God figure while contrasting the lack of faith with demon possession. Yet the details reveal the actual story. Tellingly, the man pleads with Yeshu, quote, "I beseech thee, torment me not." End quote. What the man is saying is, haven't you temple priests done enough already? Haven't you tormented me with your laws and ostracizing? Look at me, I'm living in unclean tombs with Nita pigs. Isn't that enough for you tormenting religious persecutors? Then Yeshu does a strange thing. He asks the man's name. To this question, the demon-possessed man replies, no doubt in a deep, throaty growl, "Legion," or "We are Legion," depending on the version. What the man is alluding to are the legion of temple followers that have been wrongly accused, imprisoned, and ostracized by the temple priests. So why were such people said to be demon-possessed? Because that is how temple authorities labeled those not marching lockstep with the temple system and its laws. One simply had to be demon-possessed to be so evil or foolish. Centuries later, Soviet Judeo-Communists based their political ideology on the writings of Karl Marx, the son of a rabbi. Therefore, It is unsurprising to find Judeo-Communist doctrine labeling anyone opposing their political ideology as insane. Of course, it had to be medically scientific, as Soviets were hardcore atheists that did not believe in religious demonic folderol. What actually took place was Yeshu telling the man, "Yes, I am a priest, but I have not come to take you back or torment you further. Instead, I have come to forgive your sins against the temple. I have come to restore you to your people, your God, your religion. I am here not to torment, but to end your torment by cleansing you of sin. I now place all your sins unto these swine." And with that, Yeshu drove the swine into Lake Gennesaret. The irony to the story is that Yeshu was using a scape pig to take on the man's sins, a devilishly unclean version of the temple's traditional scapegoat. But what about the swine drowning? What did Jewish storytellers, who abhorred pigs, actually know about these animals, or the water lived around in the 1st century? Apparently, nothing at all. Anyone that has lived around pigs knows they are excellent swimmers. Throw pigs in water, and instead of drowning, they will swim away. However, Yeshu driving the demons into the holy unclean pigs and then driving them into the lake was a symbolic act of mikvah ritual purification. While not mentioned, there can be little doubt that Yeshu performed the same ablution ritual to the man, fully cleansing the man from the filth of legal uncleanliness, not to mention what he must have smelled like. I'm not sure about the demon's swimming ability. Unlike pigs, I have serious doubts about their existence in the first place. But would it matter as long as pigs can swim? After all, the demon is supposedly just along for the ride anyway. While video and audio contain AI elements, script content is completely human-generated. There is no AI-generated script or script editing included in the narration.